This is the Believe in Texans podcast alongside former Houston Texans wide receiver, 6-year NFL veteran Cecil Shorts III. I'm Patrick Creighton, host of Area 45 on Sports Radio 610, your flagship home of all things Houston Texans. And 5-1. The beatdown that we said was going to happen happened, although maybe the Texans gave a few more points than we thought they would. But 41-21 victory as they break the hex of Foxboro, get their first franchise victory at Gillette Stadium. And a 20-point win means if you had gone to Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything sports betting, and taken the Texans and laid the 6.5, you were a winner. Bet Online, the game starts here. Hopefully, you were all winners as much as the Texans were winners because despite the fact that you might say there's a few things to clean up here, because there are, this was a very complete victory by the Houston Texans, offense, defense, special teams. This was – they own this game in every facet, Cecil.
They handled it like we thought they would. Right. I think the first two drives, starting the game off, 2 touchdowns, long drives, taking care of business. I'll be honest with you. I thought after the first 2 drives, I'm like, oh man, they might score 60. Like this is, they look unstoppable right now. Right. But the defense came to play. I do think, I think at one point in time, it probably should have been 17-0, maybe 24-0. If you look at, you know what I mean, some of the, I believe they turned the ball over. We got the ball in their territory, missed a field goal, and then something else happened. So I do think there's room for improvement there, really putting the team away early. But overall, man, I just think it was a good performance. Being able to move the ball, stop them, and then just make a hard day for Drake May.
Their first 2 drives, they moved the ball with ease.
Easily.
On their third drive, came after an interception. Caden Bullock had gotten an interception. By the way, remember we said turnovers for the Houston Texans defense. Not 1, not 2, but 3. Well, they actually wound up with 3 on Drake May and 4 total.
Yeah.
Kaimi misses a field goal, 40-yard kick, which, look, 40-yard kick shouldn't be considered anything to sneeze out, but for Kaimi Fairbairn, that's an easy kick.
Yeah.
And he missed that. And Kaimi doesn't miss these kicks. And this is the first time, and then they said, like, the first time, like 56 attempts, he's missed a kick from that range.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, usually when weird things happen, that's when you start to go, all right, what nonsense is coming up now? Like, how are they going to find a way to slow themselves down? And after that missed field goal, they force a 3-and-out. They march right back down the field again in like 3 plays. And then Dalton Schultz has a ball go off his hands in the end zone for a tip drill interception. Yeah. That should have been a touchdown. That should have been a touchdown. And right there, between the missed field goal and the fact that your tight end suddenly gets a case of the bobbles in 24. The end zone, it's 24-0.
Yeah, you're right. It's 24.
It's a runaway. And, you know, then their next possession was one where they have the ball at their own 9-yard line. And even though they've moved the ball up and down the field nice and easy the whole game, all of a sudden, the offense gets super conservative. And I didn't understand why at your own 9-yard line, all of a sudden the offense is getting super conservative when you've moved the ball with ease on 3 straight drives. And, you know, they wind up giving up that long touchdown pass the end of the first half. They go into the half 14-7 when it should have been at a minimum 24. And I think it's fair if a lot of people were wondering, all right, you know what? They had a lot of opportunities to really put this game out of reach, and they've let the Patriots hang around. Patriots are going to get the ball first in the second half. Are they going to get it together, or is this going to be one of those games where they're sweating it out because of the unforced errors? They start the second half off. New England puts it on the carpet. Texans take it in for a touchdown in 2 plays. And after that, the Texans would score on their next 2 drives. and then they'd score 2 more times after that as well. The offense with 27 of the 41 in the second half. We've seen them come out in the third quarter and be sluggish. This time, they were kind of sluggish in the second quarter, and in the third and fourth quarter, they were ready to go.
Well, I think that comes from what we talked about. It should have been 24-0 at half. And if we see that, we know D'Amico and them saw that. Right. So I think at halftime, D'Amico laid one into him. Like, hey, we got to play up to our standard no matter what's happening on the other side of the ball. We got to play better and finish drives and do what we need to do to put this game away early. And then when you first force a turnover early in their drive, and then 2 plays later, is it Joe Mixon that scored 2 plays later? Is that correct?
What the touchdown they had in the fourth
No,
quarter?
that was the Diggs. That was the Diggs. Third quarter was Diggs. Third quarter was Diggs, right? After halftime, the fumble, and then they get the ball in their territory. And
Yeah, that was
Diggs,
the touchdown to Stephon Diggs.
that was touchdown Stephon Diggs. But stuff like that. Now, guess what? You got the momentum back on your side from the fumble and the early touchdown in 2 drives. Stephon makes a good catch, and then now things start to roll. But that's how it should have been first half. But what I liked is you regrouped, you refreshed at halftime, okay, and get back on what we need to do, and then you go out there and you execute well.
Now, C.J. Stroud had I guess we'd say a solid day. 20 of 31, 192, 3 touchdowns, and the interception that really should have been a touchdown. And, if he's got 220 yards and 4 touchdowns, nobody's batting an eye at this game with C.J. Stroud. But I think if you just look at his passing line, you'd think 192 yards, 20 completions, that might be a little below average for C.J. Stroud. But they didn't need to throw it as much because they ran the ball all over them.
Mm-hmm.
192 yards on the ground. And Cecil, you had said last week you thought Joe Mixon was going to come into this game with a big old chip on his shoulder and just go nuts. Well, Joe Mixon, 13 carries, 102 yards, and a touchdown. That's practically 8 yards a carry. Also had a pair of catches for 30 yards and a touchdown. Joe Mixon looked pretty healthy, pretty angry on Sunday.
Oh man, he was a man on the mission. Like and I guess we could have guessed that from just his interview we talked about, from practice, just his mindset, type of player he is, that he's going to come in and try to make a statement. But I think the coaching staff knew too, hey, we got to get this guy going early, right? In the first quarter, he had 10 touches. He had 10 touches alone in the first quarter, whether it's handoffs or check downs or whatever the case may be. He had 10 touches in the first quarter. Now, on those 10 touches, 2 of those drives were touchdowns. Like, when you get the balls to your playmakers and they make plays for you, it does good for the whole entire offense. So getting him involved early was huge because you missed a few games. You want to get that guy back into the groove early on, and they did. And I think the running game, when you look at it, right, people were like, oh, outside of those 2 big runs, it was a big run from Joe Mixon, the big run from Dameon Pierce. Like, outside those 2 big runs, there was nothing really going on. That's how a run game goes, though. It's 2 yards, 3 yards, 6 yards, 1 yard, maybe -1, 0. We talked about this before, right? Be consistent with it. Give your guys opportunities. Give the offensive line a chance to learn what they're going against in live action, right? And then you break those big runs. So it's exciting to see the run game get going. Joe Mixon get going. The offense is better. The team is better when Joe Mixon is on the field, right? You always feel like you always feel this week, because it's first week without Nico Collins. I guess the last 6 quarters when you have Nico Collins. But the crazy thing about Nico, and I'm not to get sidetracked, he still leads the league in receiving yards, even though he hasn't played the last 6 quarters. But when you have a guy like that out, you need other guys to step up. And you got Joe Mixon over 100 all-purpose yards. You got Stephon Diggs with a touchdown yesterday and multiple catches. Tank Dell with 7 catches yesterday. Dameon Pierce comes in big time making plays. So Joe Mixon was just part of the bunch that really stepped up and played well yesterday.
You mentioned Joe Mixon as a guy that you thought would have a big game. I thought Stephon Diggs would have a big game. He had a solid game, 6 for 77 and a touchdown. Not a huge game because they didn't need to be huge in the passing game. They ran the ball all over the place. You mentioned Tank Dell. Tank, 7 catches, 57 yards, had a touchdown. Dameon Pierce, though, was this like a welcome back Dameon Pierce moment? Like, he was so good his rookie year. He struggled so much his sophomore year. And then to see him, and look, with the power, the explosion, the
Yeah.
speed,
Yeah.
54 yards, touchdown run for Dameon Pierce was almost like a, hey, welcome back, Dameon Pierce. Where you been, brother? How big was that moment, in your opinion, for Dameon?
It was huge, right? It was huge because we in 2022, I believe, 930 something yards rushing and over 1,000 all-purpose yards. We're like, hey, we got the back for the future. This is what's going to happen. And then 2023 is like, whoa, well, this is not the same guy, right? Different system, different case. Like, what's going on? Can he fit it? Devin Singletary took over. We're like, man, what's going to happen? Then you bring in Joe Mixon. It's like, yo, where's he going to fit in? This is a huge confidence booster for Dameon Pierce, for Bobby Slowick, and the entire offense. This is big. That run alone showed me all I needed to see. It showed me all I need to see. Because in preseason, I'm like, he's not looking like he's getting it. He's not looking like the same Dameon Pierce we're used to. But the outside toss to the right, he catches it, and it's an outside zone. So he's trying to circle the defense. The thing about an outside zone or a zone scheme, you have to look for the cutbacks. So they over pursued to the outside. He put his foot in the ground like he always can do. Took his foot in the ground, found the crease, and cracked that crease. Man, it was just a pretty sight to see. So if a running back has that type of confidence again, is able to see the holes, the game slowing down for him, it makes the dynamic between Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce, that can be scary for defenses. That can be scary. When they're toting a rock like that, when they're making big plays like that, that can be scary for the defense because now you're focused on the run game. And next thing you know, here comes Tank. Here comes Schultz. Here comes Diggs. Here comes Xavier Hutchinson. Here comes Mechie. It just sets things up for a very beautiful type of offense.
The Texans offense certainly recovered from the loss of Nico Collins, and you can recover after your workouts with Cherubundi. Here it is. Look at that. Cherubundi. You know what? I told you this stuff. My daughter loves this stuff. She's been drinking this after her workouts. I started drinking it after mine, and stuff works great. It's a little 8-ounce shot, so you can slam it down in a second. It reduces soreness. It increases recovery. It helps improve sleep. When you don't sleep very much, it helps a lot. It helps support immunity, right? These are all things that are important. And you know what? These are things that major teams, they all use this stuff. They all believe in this, right? 500 college teams and professional sports teams all use Cherubundi. Every NFL team, 10 of the last 11 Super Bowl winners, all but one of the 67 Power 4 conference football teams, every college football and basketball national champion since 2007. They all use Cherubundi. You should give it a try for yourself. Available at Amazon, cherubundi.com, and at retailers nationwide, including Kroger right here in the Houston area. We were talking about how do the Texans make up for the loss of Nico Collins, right? How do they, who steps up, who gets utilized? And I think the reality is they didn't necessarily go to the, hey, we've got to have guys make up for Nico Collins. They leaned on their other top players and said, you guys need to do more. And it was Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell combining for 13 catches. It's Joe Mixon, 132 all-purpose yards and 2 touchdowns. It's Dameon Pierce at 76 yards and a touchdown. It wasn't Xavier Hutchinson. It wasn't John Mechie. It wasn't Cam Akers. It wasn't Cade Stover. And believe it or not, it wasn't even Dalton Schultz.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Dalton Schultz had opportunities. He had 8 targets. He has one go off his hands in the end zone that winds up being an interception, should have been a touchdown. He also had at least one other just bad drop in this game. Dalton Schultz hasn't looked like Dalton Schultz so far this year. Is that something that you are concerned about, or is it something you think just works its way through because look, the guy's a pro. He's been a terrific player for a long time. He'll get it figured out.
That's a good question. It's something I'm aware about. I wouldn't be concerned, but it's something I'm aware. And it's tough for a pass catcher to get in rhythm when there's so many other guys getting targeted and getting the ball, right? So I want to say he had 8 targets yesterday. That might have been his highest volume he's had all season long. That'd be my guess. I haven't looked at statistics, but that would be my guess that that's probably his highest volume or highest number of targets he's had since last season. And when you don't get that amount of volume consistently, it's hard for you to get into a rhythm when it starts coming, right? So I would put that, if I'm slow, look, I put that in the back of my head. Let me make sure I get him going. The same way you got not Damian Pierce, Joe Mixon going early this week. 10 touches the first quarter alone. I'm not saying give him that many touches, but get him maybe a stick route early on. Maybe give him a flat route, a seam. Just get him going early to build that confidence, to build that rhythm, and then he'll be good for the rest of the game. But that's something he has to work on. Even last year, you saw different moments where he should have caught the ball and he didn't, or he maybe bobbled a deep pass and like, whoa, what's going on? So I'm aware of it, but I'm not concerned yet. I'm not concerned yet, but that's something we need to watch for sure. And if I'm Bobby Slowick, I'm going to try to implement things to get him going a little early, try to get him a rhythm, and then see if things can improve from there.
When your offense hangs up 41 points, there's the idea of, well, you can sound like you're nitpicking. But
Yeah.
look, the Patriots are not a good team. And you should put 41 points up on the board against the bad football team. So, yeah, it's okay. Things they say, things that you wouldn't accept in defeat, you shouldn't accept in victory. These are a couple of things that they need to work on. Other things that we talked about from the defensive side of the ball. We said, hey, look, the Texans defense should eat. This is a team that gives up the most pressure in the NFL. The Texans defensive end duo generates the most pressure of any duo in the NFL. Well, 4 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, 8 quarterback hits against a mobile quarterback. Will Anderson had himself a day.
Mm-hmm.
He had 8 tackles, 3 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, a pass defense where he deflects a ball that winds up being an interception.
Yeah.
And then knocked Drake May over 3 other times. Man, Will Anderson was everywhere. They couldn't block him.
That is why you drafted him number 3 overall, right? That is what you want. That's what you projected him to do when it comes into like how would he look in the NFL game, right? But overall, Will Anderson was dominant, not only in the pass and rushing the passer. You saw him in the running game. You saw him making plays and around, beating his blocks and being around the tackle often in this game yesterday versus the Patriots. So he had a phenomenal game. Danielle Hunter was getting pressure and making plays. I believe he had a sack. Maybe it was a strip sack for Danielle Hunter, right? But these guys are just making plays, man. And the scariest thing, I think the defensive line played really well yesterday. And I know D'Amico called out the interior defensive line a couple games ago. But to me, they're not that bad. But Danico Autry's coming back this week.
Yeah,
like you got Danico Autry coming back this week to add on to the pressure as one of the top in the league already. Now you got Danico who's fresh, who's healthy, who's ready to go. Like this is going to be scary moving forward, and I'm excited to see it.
Bad news for the Texans defense. Azeez Al-Shaair left this game early with a knee injury. Good news for the Houston Texans. Neville Hewitt came in and picked up, looked a lot like Azeez Al-Shaair. He had 9 tackles. He was everywhere. And maybe Christian Harris back soon, which would obviously give a big, big boost to the Texans. Henry To'oTo'o played a pretty solid game as well. He had 7 tackles as well. But, you talk about how the interior of the defensive line, Mario Edwards had 8 tackles. He had a pass defense. He had a quarterback hit. Trying to look through some of the other guys. I know they don't have big statistical numbers. Tim Settle doesn't have a ton of reps, but he got a quarterback hit. Dylan Horton had a quarterback hit. So they didn't. Khalil Davis had 2 tackles for loss and a quarterback hit. Khalil Davis has actually played pretty well. He's another guy. He doesn't get. He's not in there every single snap. But he's played fairly well. And, yeah, you'd like to get more, and getting Danico back is going to be a huge boost for this team. Because not only is he another, big body Pro Bowl player now on that defensive line, but that's a guy who can beat his man and get to the quarterback. And if you can push the pocket forward and not allow quarterbacks to step up in the pocket when that pressure comes from the outside,
Yeah.
I think we'll start to see that pay off in terms of more sacks for guys like Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson Jr. because quarterbacks aren't going to have anywhere to try to sneak out and evade that edge rush coming from when that packet gets pushed forward. So I think that they kind of complement each other. Quarterback can't step up because, well, there's Danico Autry. Can't get to the outside because, well, there's Hunter and Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those are important. Kalen Bullock, I thought, played a pretty solid game. Had an interception, was around. Had a couple of tackles. Also had a pass defended. Kalen Bullock had a solid game. I thought Eric Murray played pretty well. I know he got beat for one play, but Eric Murray has the interception. Eric Murray had 7 tackles. Also broke up a pass. So you got some play from your safeties that, that was a position coming into the season of some concern. What is it going to look like for them at the safety position? And Jalen Petrie, who plays this hybrid position, 6 tackles, TFL, pass defense, looking more like that versatile player that they thought they were getting when they drafted him, looking like that guy. So, and again, I know it's the Patriots. I know their offense wasn't great. I do think Drake May gave them the best quarterback performance they've gotten all year. And Drake May is a guy, if you're a Patriots fan, you feel pretty good about what you saw from Drake May. First start against a really good defense, a good team. And he, he held his own. Yeah, he had a few turnovers. One of those came on a strip sack. He threw 2 picks. But your offense looked functional, and it hasn't looked functional all year. Your 21 points are the most points they've scored all year. Like, you feel pretty good about a guy who made his first start, showed you a few things.
He kept his poise. He made plays with his feet. Of course, I mean, if besides C.J. Stroud and I guess Jaden Daniels right now, most rookie quarterbacks turn the ball over. That's just what it is, right? It just comes with the territory. But when you go against one of the top defensive teams in the league as your opening start, as your debut, I thought he held his own, like you said. I thought he looked good. I thought he was multiple drops that different receivers had that hurt him. I thought he threw a beautiful ball over Derek Stingley for that touchdown to end the first half. I thought he showed flashes of why he's the number 3 overall pick. So I think if you're New England, you're sitting there, okay, we got some dudes. Maybe add some help on the offensive line, right? Add some help at receiver, but on the Drake May can play some ball. So I was actually surprised to see him play and be so poised as he was. He didn't seem rattled. He made some tough throws. He did a really good job once he got comfortable getting out the pocket, whether outside or just stepping up in the pocket and making plays with his feet. He's a lot more athletic than people think he is. So if you have a decent future ahead of you, and Drake May, if you could surround him with some more offensive linemen and give him some receivers that can really help him out.
Now, Texans 5-1 now for the second time in franchise history.
That sounds good, Pat. That sounds good.
Only in 2012 were the Texans previously 5-1 on the season, and certainly feel a lot better about this 5-1 than maybe he did the last 5-1. And before we take a look ahead, we're going to notice that on Cecil's head, he is not wearing a hat today. Cecil usually wears a hat, but today he is showing off, his beautiful bald head, which he can rock, and I absolutely cannot. I cannot pull that look off, but Cecil can. For those of us who can't pull that look off, we like hats. We like nice hats. And this right here is a really nice hat from Melon Hats. All right, these hats are built to last 5 times longer than any other hat. Natural antimicrobial properties so that sweat doesn't break your hat down. You don't get those ugly yellow lines. You don't get those big white salt lines going across your hat. You know what? No stains, no smell. That's important. Your hat game's got to be strong. You don't want to go out there, your hat making you look like a bum. These things are built for the water. You know what? If it gets wet, no big deal. It pops right back into shape. You need to throw it in the wash? Okay, no big deal. It'll pop right back into shape. It's the most comfortable fit and feel that you can get. And they come in multiple different sizes, small, classic, extra large. So no matter how small or giant your head is, I'm not going to say I have a giant head, but I might. Or maybe you have a small head because, like I said, I have a black one of these Melon hats. My wife stole it. My wife says it's a little smaller than mine. My daughter, she likes to steal this red hat. She head's a little smaller than mine. And they can fit no matter what. So check them out. You can get them at melon.com. That's MELIN.com. It's the most durable and most comfortable hat you're going to get. Check it out. Try it for yourself. Melon.com. All right, so let's take a look ahead here at next week as the 5-1 Houston Texans will go up to Lambeau Field to take on the 4-2 Green Bay Packers. And the last time the Texans went venturing up into the Great White North, it didn't go very well. They played a game that I did not think they could play. This time, I think we'll see a very different I don't think we're going to get that egg game from the Texans again this year. I think they got that one out of their system. But going up to Lambeau is always a tough game. Jordan Love really kind of came into his own in the second half of last season, and you see the difference he makes in that team. Looking at the Green Bay Packers, this is a game, the Texans are actually the underdog in this game. As of right now, they are 2.5-point dogs. The line opened at 3.5. It has moved down to 2.5. So when you're checking out Bet Online, of course, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything sports betting, you'll notice that the Houston Texans are underdogs in this game against the Green Bay Packers. Should they be?
What's the Packers record? 4-2?
They're 4-2.
Jordan Love's been really good the last 2 weeks. I would say no. It is a tough place to play, not because the fans are like crazy. It's just the historic place of it, the weather, everything that comes along with Lambeau Field, right? But I was surprised when you said they were the underdog. When you said it's minus, was it? They're 2-point favorites.
The Texans are 2.5-point dogs. The Packers have beaten the Colts, the Titans, the Rams, and the Cardinals.
Yeah, I wouldn't think they're. I guess I get it because they're home. They're saying that they win by a field goal, basically. But for me, I think it's pretty even. Honestly, I think it's even. I think Green Bay's a solid team. I think Jordan Love is the real deal, no doubt about it. Their defense is solid. I just don't see them being the favorites. So that line's surprising me a little bit. I'm trying to think. I don't know what Aziz's situation is right now. I know you're out with Kamari Lassiter right now, and they do have a solid receiving core. That's for sure. But to be a 2.5 dog favorite, 2.5-point favorite, I'm just not buying into that. It's more of an even match, which they're saying win by a field goal, so it's not like a huge deficit. But I think it's more even than anything.
No, he's another mobile quarterback in Jordan Love, and look, they have a solid run game. And you look at what the Packers are doing, right? Josh Jacobs is a really good running back.
He's solid, man.
And if the Texans can't slow down Josh Jacobs, it could be a long day for them on defense. Jaden Reed has kind of evolved into their number one receiver. He leads the team with 442 yards and 3 touchdowns. Tucker Kraft, their tight end, is their second leading receiver. So they don't necessarily run the traditional, the Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre offense where they're slinging the ball around to wide receivers all over the place and jamming it down the field. But they are fairly efficient in the way they operate the offense. And Jordan Love, who has not had the completion percentage that you would expect him to have, he's sub 60% right now, does have 12 touchdowns already.
Mm-hmm.
So they like to put it in the air to score. And in fact, they've only got 3 rushing touchdowns all year. So as much as they've run the ball well with Josh Jacobs and then Emmanuel Wilson, they look to throw the ball when they're in the red zone. And this is I think like you said, this is a pretty even matchup. This is the kind of team that I think a lot of people have the Texans and the Packers kind of on the same playing field. I think they look at the Bills in the same way. You notice the Texans were a 1-point favorite at home against the Bills. They're a 2.5-point dog on the road against the Packers. These are the kind of games where this bushel of teams kind of needs to separate themselves Like who's going to emerge from this grouping? And if you're the Texans and you want to emerge from this grouping, well, you beat the Bills. You forgot to show up against the Vikings. You've had a couple of games here that you could say, all right, well, what is this game? All right, well, you got beat up by the Vikes. You overcame some obstacles against the Buffalo Bills. I think this is another one of these games where it's like, okay, what exactly how far up the hierarchy are the Houston Texans? Can you go on the road and beat a quality playoff-bound football team? So I think this is an important game for the Texans. Number one, this is a team that is kind of in their, I guess you'd say is in their bracket per se, as ascending teams who are expected to be playoff teams, but somebody in this bunch is going to emerge as more than that.
Yeah.
And is it, are they able to go on the road and beat a team who's in that same category as they are? Can you handle when things go sideways? We've seen the Texans bounce back, right? They've handled adversity, but can they handle prosperity? They've won 3 in a row. Can they handle, hey, we're supposed to keep winning? Do they take the foot off the gas? Do they lose a little bit of focus? Or is it, hey, we beat the Buffalo Bills. Now we're going to Green Bay. I thought it was important that they did not slip up. And I don't mean necessarily lose against New England, but have a close, 3-point game. They needed to beat New England the way they did by 20 points. I thought that was important. Can you then maintain that, go to Lambeau, and what could very well be a dogfight game? Can you come out of this game victorious? I think that goes a long way to determining what the Houston Texans are going to be this year.
This is interesting because the NFC North, I think you have 3 teams that are 4-2, and then the Vikings are undefeated, right? So you play the NFC North this year. So you already laid an egg against the Vikings, who are playing they're one of the hottest teams in the league right now. That game was on the road. That was an early season test, your only loss of the year. Now you get a second opportunity to go on the road against, like you mentioned, a team that has the same expectations as you, make a deep playoff run. How do you handle going on the road in a semi-tough environment against a really good team that's in the same situation as you, the same caliber as team as you? When you can look at this team and say, okay, 2 good quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight end, DBs, linebackers. It seems like it's a very even matchup when you go player for player, personnel, position group for position group. How do you separate yourself, right? Good teams find ways to win it. And honestly, you never know how the standings are going to shake out. Baltimore's looking really good right now. Last year, you had to go on the road to Baltimore and try to get a victory. So if that comes around again in the playoff time, if you have to travel, can you go to Baltimore and win? Can you go to Kansas City and win? Can you go to these different away games and win the game? Like, can you handle that environment? Can you handle that pressure? Can you, like you said, handle prosperity? You're doing well, 3 in a row, 5-1. Everybody's gonna be talking good about you. You score 41 points, right? Boom, 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 boom. Now you're going against a really good Green Bay team who's hungry. Jordan Love's played the last 2 or 3 weeks. He's back in action. He's got things rolling a little bit. How do you handle that? How do you stop him, right? Nobody cares you don't got Kamar Lassiter. Figure it out. Nobody cares if Aziz is hurt. You got to figure it out, right? Good teams find ways to win tough games. So to me, this is probably the biggest game up to this point so far this season. It's probably the biggest game up to this point.
You mentioned how good the NFC North has been. The Vikes are 5-0. The Lions are 4-1. The Packers and the Bears are both 4-2. The top 4 teams in the NFL in point differential. The Minnesota Vikings plus 63. The Detroit Lions plus 60. The Chicago Bears plus 47. The Green Bay Packers plus 41. The NFC North is the top 4 in point differential this year. Now, I think that's going to change as they all start playing each other, because, one thing we've seen about, when you play in a kind of division like this, where you've got 4 teams and let's say 6 weeks into the season, they've all got 4 wins. It's as they start playing each other and cannibalizing each other they'll start to kind of pull back to the rest of the league. Maybe one team will come through, with big wins in their division, and they'll ascend to the top. But everybody else will probably beat the snot out of each other. Mm-hmm. And I tell you that week 2 win over the Chicago Bears looking better and better as Caleb Williams has played very well the last few weeks, and the Bears have gotten victories. The Bears. Now, look, they've beaten some teams. You think, okay, you can beat these teams. They beat the Titans. They lost to the Colts. They beat the Rams. The Rams are beat to hell. I mean, these are not the Rams the last several years. They are beat to hell.
Yeah, they're banged up.
They crushed the Panthers, and they crushed the Jaguars. And the Jaguars stink. The Jaguars stink. And man, if Trevor Lawrence isn't like making bad throws, his receivers are dropping the good ones. They are everything about a bad football team, and their defense can't get stops. That's a bad football team. We're going to learn a little bit more about the Bears this week because they're going to go to Washington. They're going to play the Commanders, and you get Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels 1 versus 2, and that's going to be. That's a 12 o'clock window game. That is going to be a really interesting game because the top 2 picks are going to play against each other. And right now they're both playing really good football. The Commanders lost to the Ravens this week in a game, I expected them to lose because the Ravens running game was always going to be too much for their defense. But man, Jaden Daniels had them in that game all game. He had them right there.
It was close. You see Derrick Henry. The Ravens scared me because they figured it out. Give Derrick Henry the ball. They just figured it out. Run the football.
It took them 2 weeks, right? It took them 2 weeks to realize, hey, we have this guy named Derrick Henry and we have this guy named Lamar Jackson. We can RPO the universe to death.
To death.
And like you look at what Derrick Henry has done this year, like first game of the year. He had 13 carries and 46 yards, and they didn't unlock it. Then they somehow lose to the Raiders, and they started to figure it out, right? 18 carries, 84 yards, a touchdown. And you're like, okay, you know what? We've kind of found something here. They beat Dallas, 25 carries, 151 yards, and 2 scores.
There you go.
They go to Buffalo, 24 carries, 199 yards, and a touchdown.
Yep.
They beat Cincinnati in a barn burner. Derrick Henry, 15 carries, 92 yards, and a touchdown. And then this week against Washington, 24 carries, 132 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Gee, we have Derrick Henry. We should give him the football.
Just give him the ball. Everything else will work out. Just give him the ball, then you can play action and do things. I know Zay Flowers had a good game this week, over 130-something yards, but, man, it starts and ends with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson.
Between Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, the Ravens have 1,107 yards and 10 touchdowns on the ground.
Are you serious?
And they average 6 yards a carry.
Ooh.
I mean, they are the antithesis of every other big play offense in the NFL. They run it all over you.
Were they 4-2 right now?
They are 4-2, and they might be the only team in the league that can run the ball anything close to the way they run the ball.
Yeah. Yep.
They haven't had to ask a lot for Lamar Jackson, but he still put up solid numbers, 67% completion, 1,529 yards, and he's got a 10-2 touchdown to interception ratio. Because you gotta respect that run game. That leaves a lot of receivers with some good matchups. If they had more quality receivers, I mean, Isaiah Likely's got 3 touchdowns, and most people don't even know who that guy is unless you play fantasy football and you were desperate for a tight end. Zay Flowers, solid receiver. He's got 401 yards, got a touchdown. But to me, it's the averages for their receivers, right? Zay Flowers, 12-2. Rashad Bateman, 16-1. Isaiah Likely, 11-5. Mark Andrews, 14.3. Mark Andrews finally remembered who Mark Andrews was this week. He got a touchdown catch. Like the yards per reception for the team as a whole are almost 13 yards per catch. That's a big number.
It is. That's solid.
So the Ravens have kind of figured it out. And right now you look at the AFC, and there's the Kansas City Chiefs, and Patrick Mahomes hasn't played really well yet, which means you know it's coming. You've got the Ravens, who are 4-2, and then right now you got the Texans at 5-1, trying to be the contender to the Chiefs and the Ravens. You know, trying to separate. Hey, they beat the Bills. You can't look at the Dolphins as anything anymore without Tua. It's, you know, are the Bengals going to get it together? I know the Steelers have some wins, but I don't look at the Steelers in the same light that I do as the Houston Texans, mainly because of the quarterback issue. The Bengals have a way to go because they're 2-4. They got a way to go before they get back into the conversation. You know, the Chargers are 3-2, but I don't think they're very good. The Broncos are 3-3. I don't think they're very good. The AFC is really kind of devolving into the haves and have-nots. It's the Chiefs, it's the Ravens, it's the Texans, and then from there, it's the Steelers, it's the Bills, and we're going to find out tonight if the New York Jets, who fired their head coach this week, are they contenders or are they pretenders? Yep. Because this game against the Buffalo Bills tonight, extremely important. They either need to show up or, you know, this is just going to devolve into a cesspool in the swamps of Jersey.
Man, it's interesting to see how that kind of just unraveled, right? When you bring a guy in with, and he'll say, him being Aaron Rodgers, oh, I didn't have anything to do with it. I have, you know, you guys don't think I don't have as much power as you think I do. Yes, you do. And you know you do. Like, period.
Bro, why are you lying?
Period. You know this, man. Like, don't play around with it, right? So tonight is no, to me, all the pressure on Aaron Rodgers. You have to show up and play well. You haven't been playing well. You haven't been making the throws that we're used to seeing. You've been underthrowing guys. You've been missing guys. You haven't been playing up to Aaron Rodgers' expectations or standards. And maybe you lost a step. Maybe it's not the same for you as your arm, right? And I guess you're coming back from Achilles, but all these moves are made for you. So if you don't figure this out, it's on you. Nobody else. It's on Aaron Rodgers tonight, period.
This is going to be an important game in the AFC, because obviously if the Bills win, they go to 4-2, and they kind of stay in the conversation with the Texans and the Ravens. If the Jets win, then both the Jets and the Bills are 3-3. The AFC East becomes a lot more muddy. And those teams are going to have to battle through that division to see which one's going to come out of it. But then they both wind up in a conversation where the Jets come up, the Bills pull down, and those two teams then kind of have to fight to see who's going to come up with the Texans and the Ravens and potentially the Steelers as, you know, the actual contenders. So an important game for them tonight. Texans get a big win this week, 41-21 over the Patriots. They go to Lambeau later on. We'll have another episode of the Believe in Texans podcast later on in the week as we'll preview this Week 7 game against the Green Bay Packers. But 5-1 for only the second time in franchise history. He is Cecil Shorts, former Texans wide receiver, 6-year NFL veteran. I'm Patrick Creighton, host of Area 45 on Sports Radio 610, your flagship home for the Houston Texans. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Believe in Texas podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And until later this week, let's say you'll probably find us again on Friday. Go Texans!